What's going on, fight fans? It's your host Sebastian, and welcome back to the Boxing Tip. Now, like I've been talking about to kick off the year of 2017, there's a lot of big fights happening early on, especially in January. We have the Gervonta Davis versus Jose Pedraza match, and then we got this particular match, which is actually a very significant fight in boxing, especially for the 168 pound division, being that this is a unification match between Badou Jack and James DeGale. Now, both are very solid fighters, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of give you my take on how I feel this fight, or how I feel these two fighters stack up against each other, and then even drop my pick for the winner of, who I think is going to win the fight. But we'll go ahead and start off by talking about Badou Jack first, and just a couple of things I noticed that he does very well, or just a couple of things about the way I've seen him fight. First off, he has a very good jab. If you watch, highlights or watch his fights, you will see that a majority of his offense is set up by the jab, whether it's a single jab, a double jab, whether it's kind of like a pecking triple jab. Nevertheless, he sets up a majority of his offense off the jab, which is a good thing. It is a good thing. It's a very smart way to get your power punches in, but it can easily be negated, with some fairly simple or fairly basic footwork. A lot of the times when you're jabbing, or you're kind of just throwing out the jab, kind of pecking with it to get in range to throw, either a straight right, or straight right to the body, or even maybe a right hook after it, or maybe you're using the jab to to kind of negate somebody else's, or kind of neutralize somebody else's offense. Nevertheless, if you're pushing forward with the jab, and where I feel like James DeGale will kind of attempt to neutralize this is that Badou Jack coming in with the jab can be neutralized by, like I said, basic footwork, whether it's a step laterally, away from, being that James DeGale primarily fights in the southpaw position and Badou Jack fights in the orthodox position. For a southpaw, it's a little bit simpler to get away from, like a 1-2 or a jab, or a double jab, and then the two following, or a 1-1-2 type of combination of punches. For a southpaw, it's a little bit more simple, as long as they can get their lead foot on the outside of the orthodox, get on the outside of the orthodox jab, basically getting on the outside of the orthodox fighter's lead foot, which James DeGale knows how to do. So I'm pretty sure he'll be able to neutralize some of Badou Jack's offense, in that fashion, depending on what he follows up to do afterwards, what I mean, whether it's just a evasive maneuver to get out of the way of what could be a pretty wicked right hand coming after those jabs, or maybe he uses it to maybe set up his own offense, turn Badou Jack possibly into a variety of punches. But back to Badou Jack. Also, I noticed that he's he's kind of a sneaky counter puncher in his own little way. He keeps a real stiff, kind of, not so much a high guard, but he keeps his hands really close to his chin, or his fists close to his chin. So he's always prepared to get into a high guard, to defend and block punches with his arms. Also, he shows very good head movement, so he has a decent defense. Isn't the greatest defense I've ever seen, but it is a very effective defense. But your defense can be broken through depending on the fighter you're fighting. Nevertheless, about Badou Jack's counter punching, I noticed that he likes to kind of catch and shoot. You know what I'm saying? He'll take or block those punches with his arms, out of a high guard, and then he'll come over with, either like a sneaky body shot, or a kind of like an overhand right, something in that fashion. He's very sneaky with his counter punching. It's very subtle, but it is effective. So that's another thing I like about Badou Jack. He's a pretty he's got some good agility on him. his reflexes are there. I haven't really seen him, you know, been caught by something he didn't see coming, other than, you know, his only loss, which he was knocked out pretty early on in his career. But you know, he doesn't get caught by too many surprising shots, so that's good for him. I mean, it means that he's very aware. His reflexes, you know, are very good, so that should help him in this fight against someone of the caliber of James DeGale. So we'll go ahead and move on to him. James DeGale, first off, has very good feet. I like James DeGale's feet. He's very fast on his feet. It seems like his go-to defense, you know, if his opponent decides to press the attack on him, you know, a simple back step or a simple side step, and, you know, you're out of there. You know, if you're not there to be hit, you won't get hit. James DeGale understands this. He uses his feet as his first line of defense, but in case that fails, he does have a pretty decent guard, although he has been hit before. He is there to be hit at times, so, but nevertheless, he uses his feet. He's a very, very tricky guy when it comes to his feet. You know, he likes to move laterally, take really big, you know, steps back to kind of get completely out of your range, and then, you know, jump forward. Another thing about his defense, which kind of he incorporates it into his offense as well, is that James DeGale likes to smother his opponent's offense. You notice he'll jab and kind of, you know, push forward. Not so much push, but lean, you know, dip down, change levels, and then kind of use his shoulder to press, you know, put it in his opponent's chest so he's not squared up, but it also smothers the offense of the other fighter. Well, they only, you know, if you got one shoulder into a squared up opponent's chest, they really only got one hand to use without having, you know, that'll hit you cleanly without, you know, you throw the other hand, you'll probably hit him in the back or in the back of the head or in the kidney somewhere. So you really only got one free hand to use cleanly, but, you know, a majority of the boxers aren't the cleanest fighters, so I guess it doesn't really matter so much. Point is, he takes the effectiveness out of his opponent's offense by smothering their punches when he goes in, and he uses it to get some inside fighting done too as well. James DeGale is actually a pretty decent inside fighter from what I've seen. He picks his punches, you know, pretty precisely. He's always probing for the openings while he's on the inside, keeping that shoulder close to his opponent, you know, so closing the distance completely smothers their offense. They won't be able to get off any effective shots, but while they're trying, James DeGale does capitalize on that, picks his punches, and then lands him cleanly. Another thing about James DeGale that I like, man, he's got sneaky power and he's got really sneaky speed as well. He's pretty fast on his feet, but to the eye it doesn't look like he has the most, you know, like lightning fast punches. But when he really throws them motherfuckers, man, like, he's pretty quick with his punches. His hand speed is, in my opinion, a little underrated. In some of his fights, I think it was the Andre DeGale fight. You know, they're talking about how his hand speed is, you know, isn't exactly on par with Andre DeGale's, and then boom, out of nowhere, you know, he fucking lands this like overhand left that Andre DeGale didn't even see coming, and it put him down, and it was fast. It was really fast. It was really quick, right in the middle of Andre DeGale punching. So he has very sneaky speed, and he's got pretty sneaky power too. I mean, he's not really known for his knockouts, I would say. I would say he's more known for, you know, his boxing ability, being that he's, you know, a former Olympic gold medalist for Britain, and, you know, a majority of his fights have come by stoppage, obviously, but not so much any of his major fights like the Andre DeGale fight or the Lucian Bute fight, you know, or even the George Groves fight, which he lost in that fight as well, or that would be his only loss in his career. But nevertheless, James DeGale, man, he's a really good boxer. I really like him. He does things very well. You know, he seems like a very frustrating fighter to deal with and very unpredictable as well. So he's very unorthodox, very awkward. Yeah, he's even a little awkward to watch. You know what I'm saying? But he does box very brilliant. And I see James DeGale in his unpredictable, you know, his unorthodox style and his sneaky power and his sneaky speed, not to mention his footwork, I think will be too much for the more stationary Badou Jack. Like I said, he's not. Badou Jack does do some very, he does do some nice things in the ring, but there's nothing really unconventional about him. Like I said, a lot of his offense I noticed is worked off of the jab, which is a good thing. It's never a bad thing to work your offense on a jab, but after a while it starts to become kind of predictable. You throw your jab and you follow up with the right hand so much, eventually that's a tell. Eventually somebody's going to pick up on it. They're either going to catch you right in the middle of you throwing your right hand, or it's just very easily avoidable. James DeGale has the footwork to neutralize Badou Jack pressing his jab first power punch offense. And it's not every time. I just say it's a majority of the time, at least from what I've been seeing. So I could be wrong about that. Also, and then like I said, the more stationary Badou Jack, he is pretty quick on his feet when he needs to be, but I haven't seen him really utilize footwork so much that it becomes a major thing in his game plan. So unless it's going to be different from this fight, if it's from what I've seen in previous fights from him, James DeGale should be able to out hustle him as far as the footwork and getting in position to punch. Sort of overwhelming Badou Jack. As long as James DeGale remains defensively responsible, anytime he does press the attack on Badou Jack, to not get countered back after he's done attacking, because a lot of Badou Jack's counters come after his opponent's done attacking. So kind of like the catch and shoot style counters, but basically once the opponent's done attacking, that's a good time. If they don't move out of the way, that's a good time to hit him. But like I said, James DeGale does use his feet very well. If he does press the attack, I expect him to move his feet to get out of the way of return fire. So I am going to be picking James DeGale to win this fight. I don't necessarily see a knockout happening. James DeGale seems to be able to take a pretty good punch. Badou Jack has been stopped before by lesser opposition, so it is quite possible to say that a knockout may happen, and it might come from James DeGale knocking out Badou Jack, but it's a wait and see thing. I mean, if James DeGale starts landing that sneaky overhand left, like the one that he caught Andre Durrell with and put him down, I could very well see it putting Badou Jack down. Not to say that Badou Jack has a suspicious chin, but he has been knocked out before and hurt very badly in that fight. So, if Badou Jack remains pretty, defensive, he might not get a stoppage. But nevertheless, I think James DeGale has the superior boxing ability, so I am going to be picking him to win by decision, whether it's unanimous or split decision. I guess it really depends on the judges there, but I don't really care about that. I'm just predicting him. Like, if I were to score the fight, I'd predict him to win on my scorecard. I try to score fights when they go the distance fairly, so he very well might not win by decision on my scorecard, but I am predicting him to win by a decision on my scorecard, or possibly a stoppage. But if I see a stoppage happening, I would see it come sometime early, not so much later in the fight. Usually when the two fighters are at their freshest, man, I mean, that's usually when we see like the bigger knockouts happening, unless James DeGale breaks Badou Jack down over a period of time and is able to wear him out enough to where he can get him out of there. It's been done before, not the beat down, but stopping Badou Jack has been done before. I think James DeGale has a pretty good chance of making that happen again. But I'm not counting out Badou Jack, though. That's one thing I'm not doing, is counting, because like I said, depending on his game plan, he could be a completely different fighter come fight night. So it's hard to really say that James DeGale is going to win 100% for sure. But I'm about, I want to say 75 to 80% sure that James DeGale will be the winner of this fight. But let me know what you guys think, man. Drop a comment. What do you think each fighter needs to do to win? Who do you think's gonna win? Who would you guys like to see either of these guys fight next. Anything you guys feel like commenting, man, drop on the section. We can talk about it. Also, share the video with your boxing homies. Subscribe to the channel. Introduce somebody to boxing. We got a great 2017 early in the year of 2017. We have some pretty good fights lined up, so make sure you guys get someone introduced to boxing, catch them up so they can catch these pretty good fights coming up. But that's all I got for you guys on this one. I'll talk to you guys on the next one. Peace.